Hello and welcome to the stream. Just sorting out a few technical difficulties that I hope we have figured out. Hopefully the live chat works this time. We are back in our Chicago map, and hopefully we will be resolving some of the revenue issues that we encountered last time. We kind of blew our budget on some really dense, heavy metro lines that aren't really making us back the money that we hoped it would. So instead we're switching over to a light metro strategy to hopefully bring back in some of that money. Now I have let this run, so we have a bit of money saved it up for some light metro projects so that we don't have to spend too much time sitting around waiting before starting anything new. So where we last ended off, we were working our way down the water with our sea line, and I think we're pretty much just going to keep doing that at the moment, pulling up our demand stats. There is a lot of people along this sort of existing rail line cut that we could take advantage of. We could shift click and see that a good portion of them are going to where some of our existing lines are. So there's some hope that we can get this line up and running, and that will start to bring in some money. So we're going to continue doing that. We're going to be as money conscious as possible. We're able to extend this a good bit with only a few $1,000,000, and we have about 500 million saved up right now. So hopefully that can get us 5-6 stations along here. So we will continue to move along by bringing up our demand stats. We'll pin this while we do our building. And then we have to remember we're doing light metro. We're using quad tracks. And we're trying to get as much as possible out of this 0.3x cost by being at grade. And then to get over some of these roads, we do have to go up to 15 feet, which gets us to a 0.8x cost. So let's just continue on. We'll probably throw a station somewhere around here. We will bring this down. And then we'll have this one crossing over this street. And then I think let's get just one more. Seems like there's a bit of a drought for residential nodes in here. But maybe we could get one along this street. And we could at least maybe pull from here, and a few of these. So let's build our tracks. We need to elevate this to get over. And then once we're over, we can get to our next clearing where we can go back down. I think we usually default back down to 10 feet. We want to keep our top speed up as much as possible. And then as we approach the next road, we'll come up again. And we might as well just stay up until we get to the station, and then we can drop back down again. And then here we can get away with going back up to 15, crossing these streets, and then this is pretty clear until the next station. This will be simple enough just to pull over. And then we're back up over these couple of streets. And then we can connect up to our final station here. Let's take a quick check on the cost. So this is going to be 274 million. I think that's an okay amount to spend on 3 more stations. We do have to get a crossover in, which doesn't bring up our cost too much. We can build it. And then with that built, we can extend our sea route even further. We might have to readjust our trains. We can take a look at that real quick. And I think we'll just get 1 train in low demand. I don't know if there's much more that will change with that. So we'll let this run for a little bit. We'll check our numbers after a day or two has gone by, and hopefully we will see significant improvements in our ridership, at least along this line. Now these are the 2 lines we built in the last stream, which our A line is doing pretty good for us. There's not too much more that we could do to improve that other than just extending it. This B line, however, is where a lot of our troubles are coming from. We're just not pulling the numbers that we need to. We look at our route ridership, we're only getting about 4,000 people on this line, which unfortunately does not bring in that much money. So due to that, we've reduced our trains to 2 in high demand, 1 in medium demand, and 0 in low demand times. And even with having 2 trains in high demand, we're only pulling about 4,000 people per day. But pulling up the rest of our route ridership lines, our C line, we're actually getting about 12,000 people on, which isn't bad considering how much this line has overall costed us. I imagine we've spent no more than 400 million on this, and we're already getting about half as much as our A line is getting, which costs us about 1.8 billion. So I think definitely getting these light rail connections in place will start to bring us back financially. We do have a good amount of money. I did let this build up, as you can see, and we already have an immediate bump in revenue due to our extension. And considering this was a pretty low-cost project, I think that's a pretty good bump in operational profit. And so we're just going to take a moment to let this run. And I think at this point we have sort of two options we can do. We can either choose to continue extending our sea line and just go farther and farther south into Chicago, which we could maybe shift click and drag and start to get an idea of. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of these people won't be going into our existing network. It seems like a lot of these people are more spread out. So maybe extending this line isn't as good as we think just yet. That might have to be something later on once we have some more infrastructure set up elsewhere around the map. We could also opt to go in the other direction with our sea line. Now that will be a little expensive because we will have to go underground for a short period to avoid all of these buildings. But I think if we use our light metro to cover essentially the edge of the water here, I think a lot of these people do want to go into this main area. And so there could be some real benefits there. Now the only question would be how much it would cost to first build a connecting station at Michigan Ave on our B line, and then how much it would cost to continue going, and then coming up on the other side in this what seems to be a park, since all the parks are green, and just bringing this up along the water's edge while avoiding roads and other obstacles along the way. We could also try to save our B line by just simply extending it, because it does seem like if we select some of these nodes along this road, that a lot of them do want to get into here. And so the demand is there. I think it could just be that we aren't moving far enough to justify people taking the subway system, or we might just not be moving at the right time. If we take a look at some of these other nodes, for instance, if we can find what this connection is and why people aren't taking our B line to get there, we could potentially use that to figure out some of our other problems. And so here we see it just seems like it's easier for people to drive, and a good portion of them already seem to prefer walking. So I'm not too sure. I think that's part of the reason why we are not making anything on this line. We just simply aren't going far enough. From this station, people are still willing to essentially walk from here to the A line. And that's part of what's going to really get us in terms of ridership here. Now coming back to our route ridership, since we have let this run, it looks like we've settled into about 16,000 station ridership. Our last few stations have actually been pretty helpful for us. So there is some good things happening here. And so I think let's extend our B line one station. We'll see where that gets us. Let's pull up our demand stats. Maybe we can find the best location for this to go. So we will build stations. We'll do heavy metro. This is going to be underground. And I believe we are doing -15 to keep us, or we might have done -25. Yeah, we do -25 for these, just in case, I guess, if there's any future crossings, we have a little bit of flexibility with some height. So I think we'll just get that station in there, connect these tracks. Well, first we'll have to avoid the buildings. We'll avoid the buildings, since we can't afford to lose any money. And then we need to add a crossover for this extension. And this will use about half of the money we have. We'll get that built right away. And then we can extend our B line one station further out. And it's not going to be much, but it could be a step in the right direction. I think we'll keep our distribution of trains. I think we'll just run one in low demand just to keep people moving. That might help us out a small bit with ridership. Let this play. And then we'll let some money build up. So we're seeing a lot of transfers here between our A and C line, and we could probably take a look at that if we look at our station ridership. I guess we're not actually having transfers, which is surprising. I'd imagine these would be close enough for that to happen. But maybe it's just outside of a reasonable walking distance. Because if we take a look, it seems like our only transfers are happening right here. We could extend the sea line. I was thinking that earlier. I was a little worried about cost, as we kind of wasted all of our money building the heavy metro first. But I think getting that connection could be pretty good for us. So let's see if we can even get this in here. I'm not sure what the distance is that we need to make sure we get. Looks like we need 13 feet between our stations, which makes the 25 feet that we chose to really mess us up for cost. So we're going to have a 2x cost station. And we actually built that as heavy metro, so we'll delete that and rebuild this in light metro. And already that used all of our money, but we do have the ability to take a bond out in order to do this project. Let's see if we can grab the end of our station here, which it doesn't want to connect to for some reason. And that's because we had the stations selected, not the tracks. I forget what we built this one at. And that's going to be tough to delete this. So unfortunately we don't get a refund from deleting anything, so we also have to account for the cost of demolishing this building at 322 million, or we can delete some of the tracks. This wasn't too expensive. We could pull this back and find whatever depth we need to get to in order to not demolish this building. I think usually it's around 32 to 35 feet. So 35 feet, we can get under this building. I think we could do that. And we actually are still paying off a bond, which will pay off so we're no longer paying interest, but that does lower the amount of available money we have. And so let's start building out from this side, And before we start deleting this station and pulling everything back, let's see how much money we need to save up first so that we can save up and then make that change, so we don't lose any connections while we're just waiting for money. So we start at minus 40 at this station. We'll bring this back up into our 1x cost. And we'll have to keep this low at about 30 feet. And then we'll follow this road so we get a clear path out of the dense urban area. And then if we just wanted to connect to this and have the building demolished and everything like that, we will need about 550 million. And so I think at that point it's cheaper to delete this station, probably build it here or under these roads. Maybe that'll help get a better transfer connection here. These might be close enough where people could walk between them. Or I guess it looks like people are walking between them, but technically it doesn't count as a transfer because they are not close enough to form a station group. But either way, I think maybe if we move it to this road, people don't have to walk quite as far to switch between the two lines, and then we can get under this building without having to delete it. But again, we're going to have to pretty much wait until we have the money to do so we aren't disrupting services. And I think probably an estimation we'll probably need 400 million to do this project, considering most of that is from destroying this. We could actually look up here and maybe tally it. If we subtract the 320 million from this, and then we would have to add the cost of another station, which would probably be 75 million. Yeah, I think that comes around 350 to 400 million to do this project. So I think we'll just have to wait a moment before we can start making those moves. And while we're doing that, we can just continue to take a look around and analyze some things. So if we take a look at the end of our A line, it does look like we are covering the two farthest nodes that we are able to cover. Looks like the majority of people are taking our subway. There's a few people that are driving, but I just think we're not always going to be able to get everyone. This one's a little bit more interesting, but it does make sense. They have to weigh either transferring to the B line, walking probably 15 minutes, or driving. So I don't think we're really going to be able to fully satisfy that part of that demand. We have this large node here, which we aren't getting too much out of, especially considering we have 3 or 4 destinations along the A line that would almost be perfect for them to take. So maybe it could be a timing issue. Unfortunately, there's not really a good way to figure out which one of these corresponds with these nodes. So we kind of have to do a bit of trial and error. So we did get one of them, and this just seems like they'd rather drive instead of walk. We take a look at their driving times. I'm not sure if this says when they home departure time. So they leave at 9 and return at, not sure what that would be in PM. I think that's about 5 or 6 o'clock PM. That should be covered. Actually, it looks like that just flipped. So that was weird that that happened, but it does actually seem like we can do that because that falls perfectly in line with our heavy time period trains where we're running 2. Now let's see if maybe this station that we added out here is helping at all. It seems like this node is doing really well. It seems like just this one, which I don't think we're going to be able to cover anytime soon. But everything else seems to be pretty well covered. This makes sense that we're splitting it almost 50-50. Taking a look at some of the other demand points around here, we have this large one that we're getting a couple of people on. So let's check in on our B line. And it seems like those changes that we made, just adding a station and then adding a train for low demand, has doubled our ridership. I think it's mostly the extra station, where if we look at our station ridership, that's up to 4,000 people. And so I think that's slowly reviving us, at least on the B line. The A line is doing just fine. The numbers on our C line are continuing to look pretty good for light metro. So I think there is some promise to our B line. We just have to very slowly continue extending it northwest. And it seems like that did result in a little bit of an increase of our operational profit. I believe that's when we added our extra station. So we went from 47 million to 52 million a day. I think now we're getting to the point where we could accept a $100 million bond and complete this project to connect to our B line. So I think what we're going to do is pause. And we're going to actually have to let this play to let trains get out of the area. And we'll have to pull this back to the nearest crossover point that the trains could use. And it looks like that can happen here. We'll quickly unpause to let the trains get out of the area. And then at this point is when we can delete these tracks, delete this station, delete all of that, and then build a new light metro, 15 feet underground, crossed here. We'll connect the tracks. And then from here over, we will have to go down. We'll go down minus 30. And then right before we get to the building, we'll go minus 35. Only as far as we need to, so we aren't wasting money. And then back up to minus 30. And unfortunately, we're going to have a bit of a slowdown on this line. But then these should be able to connect up. And I forget if we stayed... I think we were at 30 feet on this line. But we can connect up there. We'll have to add a crossover. And so this ends up being a $350 million project. We can get that bond, and that allows us to have the money to build it. So we'll add these stations back in. And now we have a connection to our B line, which could also help bring in more people that way. So looking at our frequencies for our... I accidentally backed out. Hopefully that's saved recently. Looks like it did save. Anyway, back to our C line. Looking at our frequencies. 32 minutes for medium demand. 32 minutes for low demand. I think that's fine. The medium demand is a little bit questionable, but I think we will stay with it for now. I suppose we could always monitor how full these trains are getting. But it looks like we do have a small increase of our C line. Maybe a small increase of our B line. And we can probably start to see transfers. Looks like about 3,000 people transferring here. So that's a pretty good addition to our line. And then it should be a pretty straight shot out of here. Hopefully we can get our next station above ground near the water's edge so that we don't have to have another $75 million or $100 million station. But we might even be able to continue this if we can get an at-grade station here and then slip underground. We might have the money to just barely be able to get that through. However, I don't know if a station there would be worth it for light metro. We might have to start exploring other options before doing that, because these people would already most likely be walking to their destinations, if not taking the A line. So let's take a look around and see if there's any other existing rail cuts through the city that we could follow that could be useful for us. There is one here that maybe could help. It doesn't... I guess it's probably about as densely populated as along our sea line. Because if we click and drag and take a look here, there is a good amount of people. We could connect it to this end of our A line. That way we could keep it pretty cheap as we come through and then curve over the river and follow it out this way. So that could be another good way to draw more people in. I think we'll actually start doing that right away. We'll get the blueprints built for that. So this is going to be an at-grade station. We'll give it a little bit of space to go underground eventually. I believe that should be enough space for it to get under. We can test this out just by... Well, actually, we'd have to get low enough to not demolish buildings. So let's see if we can get to minus 35 feet from here. Yeah, I think we'd need a bit more space. But it looks like we might be able to get close. We get to minus 15. That still destroys the building. Let's build this at 0 feet. And a little bit farther away. Now this should be able to get us deep enough to where we don't have to destroy this building. Or at least we could do something where we slide in here and avoid having to demolish the buildings. So we'll pin our demand stats so we can get an idea of where the best station locations would be. We will have to raise this up to 15 feet. And I think we'll get this split right here between these two larger nodes. Let's see if there's any workers in this area. It doesn't seem to be any working areas near here. So I think we're going to avoid a station at this road. We'll put it here. Our next one could be here at this road. And this might be where we start to see how much it'll cost to build this out. Right now we're at 142, so we're right up against how much money we currently have. But I think if we're careful with all of this, we can build out all the tracks without adding too much more to our cost. So we'll have to make a nice gentle curve. It'll limit us to 27 miles an hour, but we're coming up to a station. And I believe we have to be at 15 feet to cross a river. So unfortunately, we're going to have to stay at about 15 feet all the way to the station. That is going to add some cost. Hopefully not too much. Once we get here, we can drop down, save some money. then at the road build up, and we'll probably stay up all the way to the station. So this will cost us 246 million. We'll have to add a crossover at each end. And that brings us up to $268 million. And I think this will get us a few good connections. Let's maybe scope out what we would be getting. So it seems like we could actually make this connection if we're able to draw the people from this node. They could take our light metro, connect to our A line, go north on our A line to be able to get to this node, and then take it all the way up to get to here. The only question about that is whether driving is faster than transferring. That's usually the case when there's a transfer involved. But we can take a look at some of these other nodes, specifically this one. This is another case where hopefully they would prefer to have a transfer instead of driving to these three nodes. And then it looks like another case where we could potentially get this one with our A line as well. I think it's going to be pretty similar with all the other nodes along this line. The ones that line up along our A line are the ones that we're hopefully going to get. And then some of these other ones we're just not going to get because they're going in the complete opposite direction. But once we get this line running, much like the C line, I think it'll really come together much quicker, as building it out one station at a time would start to be pretty beneficial. We can keep looking at more of these nodes farther on down the line, and it does seem like there's some, pretty much almost all these have at least one group of people that would be going somewhere into the main area of Chicago along our A line, where the goal is then to get those people to take what will be our D line farther into the city. So just a few million more to go and we can afford this extension, which will transfer to our A line. I think we could come back and take a look at our C line and how we've been doing there. Our B line is steadily rising, our C line as well. So I think this small connection here is starting to prove its worth. We can see station ridership is actually pretty high here. Transfers are up to 6K. And stations all around look to be pretty good. I think we're getting more people at this station too. Again, because we made the walking distance between these two stations slightly shorter. So I think that's helping us out too. We haven't really seen this number increase, but that's been established for a while, so I don't think we're going to see that move. And we are starting to get warnings of our trains getting full, and I think that was for our C line. We'll have to try to catch it the next time it pops up. But it looks like it's during our high demand hours. And it is on our C line. We can look here, and it looks like they're getting full. So we have two options when that happens. We could either choose to increase our cars per train, so we could bring that up to 4 cars per train, or we could run an extra train during high demand. We might do that so we can do 3 on high, 2 on medium, and 1 on low. But I don't think we're quite ready to make that jump yet. I think I want to get this line established first, and then we can add another train to our C line. And let's take a look at our bond. We've paid so far 10 million of it just through our regular payments, which we don't really have a choice on paying that. We could pay it all off and then get rid of the interest that's adding up, but I don't think that's in our best interest at the moment, since we only need 50 million more, I think, 40 or 50 million more to build this project. So after we build this project, we can focus on paying off this bond, because the interest does build up. This is an hourly payment, not daily. And so over the course of a day, if we multiply that by 24, we end up paying about, I think, close to 5 million in interest. I think it probably breaks it out down here. 2.4, actually, yeah, 8 million in bond payments a day. So we definitely want to pay this off after we build our next project. We are still running with a $4 fair price. I think that's something we settled on in the last stream. If you think we can get away with higher or lower, I think someone mentioned we probably shouldn't go more than 5. So we settled sort of on $4. We can go cheaper once we have more cash flow coming in. That way we can really get more ridership. And that's probably where we're losing some ridership on some of these nodes, is just simply not making it cheap enough. But we do now have almost enough money to... Actually, we do have enough money to build our project. We can build that, add a new route, make this our D line. And then we will have it just as these 3 stations for now. But as we did before on our C line, we will slowly extend this out as it continues to do well. I think we have that correct. Our trains we're going to have to buy probably 2 more. But we will run 1 train in high demand and 1 train in medium demand for now. And then once we get to 4 stations, we could probably run a second one during high demand. And so we're going into the nighttime hours, so we're not going to see how this works just yet. We'll have to wait until the morning in our medium and high demand hours to see if people are moving on to this line. We could pull up our trains and watch the capacity to also get an idea of how effective this line as being, as we can see, in low demand. In the middle of the night, we're not really getting much of anything. Although I think I did notice we are making money throughout the night, besides maybe a few hours around midnight, which I guess is good. I usually don't expect to make money overnight, but the fact that we are is probably just a little bonus. And we're going to slowly start to ease into the morning hours. We have our first train running on our D line. And we are seeing a few red dots pop up occasionally. That indicates people taking this line. And unfortunately, we're really not seeing too much. Although here they come. I think once we get closer to typical rush hour times, we might see more. Could also look at our route ridership and get a sense that way. I mean, we're still under 1,000. But it's also been less than 12 hours that this line has been running. And I think this will really open up once we get a 4th and a 5th station. Sometimes it's just really hard to justify a trip on a 3-station line like this. Especially when we can't take that line straight into the heart of where most people need to go. So it looks like now the morning rush hour is over. We're sort of in the middle of the day. And we're just not getting that many people. We're not going to get too discouraged from that at the moment. We will continue and build out our next station. And I think that's going to intersect this road. Just like that. And then we'll lower this down until we get to the road. Where then we can focus on connecting up to our existing line. So we can see our usage by the hour on this line so far. And it looks like we're getting the most usage in the afternoon. And it almost seems like it might be useful to have a low demand train. I'm not sure, because we have the influx of people coming in during high demand, so maybe that means people are working night shifts and they need a train probably somewhere between 2 and 6 a.m., which would be in the low demand hours. So we could throw a train on in low demand, see if that ultimately helps at all. I mean, we'll need to run one in low demand eventually anyway. Actually, I want to go back to our C line because we did mention we wanted to add another train in high demand. We'll add another one in medium demand and see if that helps out much. And then how much did we need for our new line? 114 million, which we should get that any moment now, and we'll get another little extension there. And so we should have enough money now. We can come into our construction menu, add that line in, and just extend this route. I don't think there's any need to change anything still. It'll just be one train running along this line. Yes, it does take quite a while to build up money in this game. Part of it is probably the lack of efficiency on the B line, and I think part of it's also just the early game. A lot of it does end up being a bit of a waiting game. But I think if I were to redo this, we would probably start with a lot of light metro. That keeps things moving. It's not too expensive, so we could probably get 4 or 5 lines set up with light metro lines with the starting 3 billion. But we can take a look at how we're doing now. And yeah, we're still stuck at about $50 to $60 million a day. Let's see how much we have left on our bond. We get about 80 million, we can afford to pay that off, and at least then we don't have to worry about the interest that we're paying on it. Our route ridership on the D line really isn't improving too much. We're at about 2,000 people. We can take a look at the transfers, and we do see that people are transferring to the A line, although that is kind of their only option. I think one thing we could do to maybe try to improve ridership on the D line is getting another station somewhere here. So there's a bit more of a direct connection to the heart of the city. And thinking pretty far, like long-term future for this line is maybe it comes through, it goes underground through all of these buildings, and then it can curve and take this cut through. And then it almost ends up as sort of a, maybe it could end up as like a loop. It looks like there's maybe a path we could take. I don't really know Chicago too much, so I'm not familiar with the popular areas in the existing train network. I think that's probably the biggest challenge with this between the usual Philadelphia playthrough. I'm at least familiar with the Philadelphia transit system. Playing on Chicago, having no knowledge of the current transit situation, kind of makes this a fun challenge. Brings a fresh perspective. But it definitely does make for some unique situations where there's not really a main area in this really dense portion. For instance, Philadelphia has City Hall, where we can have all of our lines sort of converge. Maybe that exists here in Chicago, or maybe it's somewhere more near this river. Because just looking at the demand stats, everything is concentrated in this area. And then it seems like all the workers are in this area. I could continue extending the A line. However, I think heavy metro is more expensive than light metro, so that's why we've been trying to stick with light metro at the moment until we can bring in some more cash. And unfortunately, we can't really switch between the tracks. I think they're too... In real life, I think they're two sort of separate systems, so that's why we can't really connect them. I do think maybe adding a station on the D line here would help and draw more people in. Because if we did pull up our demand stats, a lot of the workers are right here at the edge of where that station would be. So I think we can start to plan for that. So this is going to have to get pretty deep because we're going to have to prepare to go under these buildings. But we can do station here. And then tracks that begin to come up, and we'll have to thread this between the buildings. So maybe we could do something like this. We don't have to wait too much longer to build this. And I think maybe a more direct connection with our D line will pull more people in. Let's see if maybe we can see... Yeah, we can see we're not really getting people taking our train to get to here. I mean, even here, if we can get these people to take the D line to here and then walk, that would be a significant improvement. Same thing with this one. I think once we get this connection made, we should be able to get most of these people to take this train to two stations and closer to there. So let's see where this will get us. We can confirm that. We'll see how that goes. So we're sitting at about 2,000 people. We can keep this up and see if that goes up or down. I think we are seeing slight improvements. We're in the middle of the night right now, so we aren't going to see too much improve. And pulling up station ridership, looks like these two are close enough to form a group. And we're not seeing too many transfers. But we are seeing about 1,000 people for this station. And that number seems to be going up a little bit. We're seeing about 2,000 here, and then maybe 1,000 at each of the other stations. Our ridership is continuing to go up, so these are good signs. I think maybe we can get this to 4,000, letting it run through a full cycle of the day. And then maybe we take a look at, once again, adding another station farther on down the D line. Now, it was pretty much around this point that our C line really started to open up. Once we got past 3 or 4 stations, it really started to make sense for people to start taking this line instead of driving. So hopefully we'll see the same results. Don't think we can guarantee anything, though. So we can get another stop right about here. And we'll work from this way in, building our tracks and keeping it. I guess we do have to keep going up and down over these roads, so we will keep this high. I think once we get to here, we can start going up and down, because there's a bit more space between the blocks. We'll bring that down, bring it back up. I think we have to be careful building in these shorter segments, because we do get the lower speed limit. So maybe we'll just keep this high, so we don't have to worry about the changing speeds. So let's take a look at how things are going now. We've let our D line have a day or two to run. There's about 4,000 people. Our demand stats. We do have some purple residential nodes along here, so we are doing something. The workers, we're really not going to get much information out of this because they're just so large at the moment. Once we get a larger network, we might be able to start seeing these change colors. And then let's take a look at our stations. This station is continuing to rise in usage. We're up to 3,000 people. It looks like this dropped off as this transfer sort of became redundant with these two stations up here. But I think everywhere else has stayed about the same. And we can take a look at the overall usage by hour. We are getting a good amount of people in low demand. It's not a lot, but it is a few. And it looks like still most of our demand comes from the afternoon. Where it looks like the afternoon from about 3 to 6 is where most of our people are using this line. And let's just get a quick update on our money. We actually have to add a crossover, which will increase our cost a little bit. But we should still be able to get that money here in about a minute or so. And then we can extend this D line just a bit further out into the suburbs of Chicago. So coming into the morning, we'll see a little bit more money kind of coming in. We look at our overall hours. Looks like 6 a.m. is when our money starts to pick up, and then it stays up throughout the day until about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. We can see, looking at our all-time graph, how we've slowly increased over time, and it looks like we are back to sort of pushing all-time highs on our profits with our most recent extension. So again, in a moment here, we just need about 10 million more, and we should be able to start picking up this group of people, and we can see where most of them want to go. It does start to seem like it's all over the place, but there is a good amount of them that do want to go around our existing network. And we can continue to push this out and maybe see if we were to add another station. I think at a certain point, once we extend too far out here, having such a small network doesn't quite benefit us. As we can see with all these people, only a small handful want to go here. The rest sort of work in random spots throughout the rest of the city. We might end our D line with this stop. Or maybe just we could go one more. We'll see how this one extra station ends up affecting the line. If it has a really good effect, maybe we can justify one more station. But now I think we can get 2 trains on high demand. We'll stay with 1 in medium demand and 1 in low demand. And we can already see a few people coming to take this station. We can see our network is still only covering a small fraction of Chicago, especially when we pull up demand stats. We are still just barely scratching the surface on ridership. We're at only about 1%. So there is a whole lot of people that we can still reach out and connect to. It does seem like moving north along the water is potentially a good idea. I think that's going to have to be our main focus next. And now whether we do that by extending our A line along this road, which was Clark Street, or it's with light rail along the park, I'm not really sure which one would be the best to go. The only issue with extending our A line is that they would have to walk to the stations a bit farther. If we did use our light rail C line and just go way up here, there would be minimal walking, and that would give us the best chance of getting these people. But we would be using light rail, and so our capacity would be severely reduced compared to what we could gather with our heavy metro trains. And so I do think that's going to be our best option, is extending our C line up and along the water here. We could do a branch. I do see what you're saying. If we branched our A line, we could do it right here and then follow this road. That's not a bad option. I think we could definitely do that. Yeah, so this is what we've covered so far. It is just a small portion of Chicago that we're getting. A bit of context, we blew most of our money starting on with this A line and B line, which are heavy metro running through the densest part of Chicago. And we've been struggling to build up a significant portion of money since then. But I think our next best option, as recommended, is to branch here so we can get most of these large residential nodes, which largely seem to want to extend into downtown. And then we can have our other branch continue to follow the original path we were going to follow, which is a bit more inland. So I think the first thing we'll do is pay off this bond so we no longer have the, whatever it was, 50 million in bond payments, or 8 million in bond payments a day. And then we will have to think about where we want our stations. And I think our next station could be here. It's a little bit close to our existing station, so we could alternatively build another one here. So let's maybe try to just build something out just to get an idea on cost first. And I think this branch will raise up to 15 feet, as we found the 25 feet we were using wasn't really helping us in any way. In fact, it was kind of hurting us when it came to crossing over. But if we just do a simple split here, there are more efficient ways to do this, but I don't think we have the money at the moment to do that. Also, I think we're not too congested along this line to need to focus about separating these junctions. Now, the game might have some issue with that because the game has a few issues with signaling. It seems like anytime you just have an intersection like this, you're always going to have trains having issues with each other, but as long as the frequency of the trains isn't too high, there's usually not an issue of blockages and the game sort of breaking. But we could do something like this to start off the branch. Then we could have another station here, maybe another one farther out here. Well, let's get an idea on cost. So this will only be 168 million. Granted, I don't think this first station is going to be too useful for us right away. I think it's going to get more useful once we get our second and third station along this branch. But getting it started wouldn't be the worst thing. Well, let's maybe just get a quick idea on how much this would cost much farther down the future once we get this line fully built up. We'll probably have that station. We would bring these tracks and follow North Broadway Street. Avoid any buildings. It seems like it's going to be a little bit tricky with the buildings there, but we could do an elevated train line. I don't think it wouldn't save us too much money with heavy metro through the city here, but our other option was using light metro and extending this line along the water, sort of on the edge of where this park and the buildings are. But ultimately, my worry with that is capacity. Light metro cars, I think fully maxed out cars only carry 800 people compared to heavy metro, which could get up to, I believe, 2,400 people at the max. And especially with this being the densest part residence-wise, we want to make sure that we have the capacity to move those people north and south along these lines. So we found out how much this would cost. I think maybe let's explore what it would cost to extend our light metro. We'll clear our blueprints. Now this does require a bit more buildup, but it'd be a lot easier to expand and get a bit more of a baseline income from that area. So if we come in and we get our light metro, and I think we're at minus 40 here. And then we bring this up so that we're at 1x cost. And we bring this up to minus 15, so we're at the minimum for building under the roads. We could build a station somewhere here along the water. And then this could be elevated to save a little bit of money. We could maybe get that around here. And then we have to figure out a spot where we can transition. So we might need to bring this line over. And then right about here is where we could come above ground. So we could do something like that. And then at this point, it'd be pretty straightforward to extend it along the buildings here. Yeah, I'm building with quad tracks at the moment because I anticipate a lot of these lines becoming our most congested lines in the future. We don't get any refund for deleting things, and there's no way to upgrade parallel tracks to quad tracks. So usually it's best just to build with quad tracks from the start so that it's not a huge rebuild process once we're ready to add express lines or even just other lines in general. So that's why we're going with quad tracks for everything at the moment. If we get to other lines, that branching line could maybe just be parallel tracks. That would probably only be the branch line running there. But we are still under our current amount of money. I could maybe add another C-line stop. I'm just wondering if that's worth it, because we have one here, and we have our A line not too far away. I guess we do have this one node here that would be inaccessible from the C line. So maybe we could just add that in. Or at least we can see how much that would cost. I believe we're at minus 15 here. It's okay that this is a bit slower at the stations because the train has to slow down anyway. So it doesn't add too much. I mean, we're already almost back to how much money we have. I think we'll stick with it. That could help us in the future having that station there. And then the next line for our C line, I think would have to be all the way down here. We could maybe try to fit it here, but then we run into... Well, we could go above the road. It wouldn't help us too much with cost, but... I think, yeah, let's do that. That gives us a reason to get even closer to these buildings, because I don't think we would want to be building stations on the opposite side of the highway here, or what I assume is a highway. This could just be a wide road. Well, let's see how much it would cost to extend these these three stations. And I think if we have the money for it, there's no reason we shouldn't go for it. So now at this point we are at only 0.3x cost for being at grade. We will want to gently curve this to not lose too much speed. We might just have to be okay with 40 miles an hour. Then bring this back down. To connect up to this station. And that will cost us 315 million, which we are almost already at. I think maybe let's go one more and then we could take out a bond to cover the rest of the costs. So if we just keep going with this, and I think right about here would be a good spot. We pull up our demand stats. That puts us right around some of these larger nodes. And then we can go over this road. I think from this point on, we'd pretty much be just following this road. We will have to continue building over it at a 0.8x cost, but that's still cheaper than going underground. So I think I'm okay with that. And so this project would end up being $340 million, or $440 million. Maybe let's delete this crossover, even though it might not help out too much. Oh, this could be a college campus. Although usually if it's a college, there's a little education icon next to it. So I'm not sure what all these buildings are. It could be maybe an office park or maybe a campus, but the game doesn't see it as much more than a few hundred people, which should be covered by our A line. We're not going to worry about that too much. The Philly series is going to continue. There's definitely still more to be done there. But getting back to this project, let's see, how much was this? It was $430 million. So just shortly we could take the $100 bond, or $100 million bond, and then build this. And I think that'll really bring up some of our passenger numbers along our sea line. So we'll probably have to increase the train capacity if we haven't already, and then definitely improve the frequency, and hope that this ends up getting us a good amount of money. So I think we're at the point where we could grab this, and we are in the middle of the night, so we won't be earning too much money, but any moment now we should have enough to build this. Do I plan on playing Transport Fever 3? Yes, I think I do want to play that when it comes out. I'm not sure if I'll do them in the same style that I did the Transport Fever 2 videos. There also probably won't be much detailing when the game first comes out. But I do plan on playing Transport Fever 3 when that comes out, which I think is later this year. I'll have to keep up with that. Alright, so we've built out this new set of stations. We need to extend our route itself. We'll bring that all the way out there. And then as for trains, let's buy 6 more. That allows us to go up to 4 cars per train. And then I think this frequency is almost right on what we would want. I think maybe we go 1 more in each demand area. Just a few more million and we can get the last amount that we need. And so usually what I try to target for frequencies is 10 minutes for high demand, 15 minutes for medium demand, and 20 to 30 minutes for low demand. I just try to think about how long I'd be willing to wait for a subway in real life. I think if it was definitely during rush hour or after work, no more than 10 or 15 minutes. But if it's the middle of the night, you could imagine you'd probably be waiting 20 to 30 minutes if you just missed a train. But I think we'll have to let that wait, see how those ridership numbers go. I don't expect it to be anything too crazy right away because we are competing with our A line at these 2 stations. This station's a little bit different since this is a pretty good distance. And then I think once we get farther out here, then that's when we'll see the full potential of this strategy. And we can already see the bump in ridership on our C line. We're almost matching our A line, which makes sense considering this almost runs parallel to our A line, plus a few more stations. It just doesn't have the capacity. So I fully expect our C line to end up being our highest ridership line until we get the money to start extending heavy metro a lot more. And we can already see in the station ridership, we're getting 4,000 extra people here. Another maybe 2,000 people here. I guess something to note is we did take away some ridership from our A line, and we do actually see that dipping down. I think we were up to 38,000 at its maximum, and now we're down to 34,000. And our D line is actually not doing too bad. We're up to 8,500 people taking our D line. So maybe 1 more station there, and that might actually be something worth the effort. So extending southwest. Does look like there's a good amount of people that way, and we don't really have any lines going there. I think really my biggest worry was finding a road to follow, or even an existing cut through to follow. It does look like there are some that are east-west and north-south, and then we do have this road here, which would be Archer Ave, which we could follow, and potentially maybe even branch our A line so that it continues south, and then maybe a branch comes out this way. Or we could do something with light metro, and maybe at some point along here we could split and then follow maybe whatever this cutout is. This looks like it's probably a nice road with green space in the middle, but we could use that for light metro for a good bit. Looking up here, we are seeing these turn a bit more pinkish and purple. This is the big one that I've had my eye on. It looks like we are covering most of their needs to get into this area. Interesting that this one hasn't switched over yet, but it could just be that the simulation hasn't run through that yet. I think usually it takes a day or two for everything to update. But coming back to our station ridership, these seem to be doing pretty well, 6,000 and 4,000. Those are starting to rival our A-line numbers. Nothing's really changed down here. We do have 5,000 almost at all three of these. But I think just the extra connections all the way up here is helping. We can also take this chance to take a look at our money, since I believe that was a pretty big project, and maybe it hasn't been reflected, but it seems like it should be. We built this on day 68, 69. It looks like it stayed about the same operational profit. We might just give it one more day and see how things have changed there. We do see the jump in our revenue. However, we did really extend the amount of cars that we are moving on this line. So we doubled it by doubling the number of cars from 2 to 4, and then we added an extra train. So we can sort of keep an eye on these. I mean, these trains do get about half full, maybe a little bit more. So I think maybe another strategy is to just keep this at 2 cars for now and just really have a high frequency. So maybe we try this out. That way we save a significant amount on cost. Because there's no reason to increase our revenue if we're also increasing our expenses. So maybe we save the increase in cars for when we get all the way up here on our C line. I think we do have the money to extend one of our lines. I think we're going to extend our B line because that needs a little bit more help. Our last extension almost doubled the ridership, just adding this station. So I think if we could get one more station on here, this wouldn't be too bad. And so we can easily just add a really small extension to our B line, which should bring that line back a little bit. Since we were struggling with ridership, hopefully bringing this out a bit more will help. We might have to be a little bit finicky about sneaking by this building. Seems like that might work. I guess this little piece of track is too short to add a crossover, so I think we'll just rebuild the station. We'll try to line it up a little bit better. That should work. That looks like that snaps just good. And we almost have the money right away to just build that, which I think we will do. So we'll do that and then extend our B line. And let's just double check that the frequencies are still okay. Yeah, these look fine still for what this line is. It looks like that might not have actually taken. So we have to rebuild or redo this route. So now that should work. So originally I think we were planning on running this B line out to this little, what seems to be maybe a roundabout. Not quite round. But that way we get enough distance for people to seek value in taking this line. Because we do have these few nodes. There's a good amount of those people that are trying to get into this main area. And I think we should be able to start picking those people up. So right now I think we're really trying to focus on short-term profits so that we can expand our lines. We didn't really set ourselves up the best way, as our B line is still struggling with ridership relative to our A line and our C line. And our newly added D line doesn't have too much ridership, but it is a light metro line, so there's a bit more leniency to lower ridership with that. But I think once we get to the point where we are making about 100 million of profit a day, that's about the point when we can really start to at least keep things rolling on the live stream. We do also have these bonds, and once we reach 100 million profit a day, we unlock the 500 million bond, which that would really open up our options in terms of projects. So we could build out a 3 or 4 station extension with bond money alone. Because unfortunately, most of the early game is just sort of waiting for money to build up so you can build your next line or your next station. But I think we are slowly on course of correcting things here in Chicago. We almost have enough money to pay off this bond. We could look at our ridership, and our C line has now surpassed our A line. I'm not sure if that's going to have too much impact farther on down the line, but the fact that we have a light metro line outcompeting our main heavy metro line tells me we did something right with this C line. So I think that's going to be our main focus moving forward, is just extending this as far as we can go. I think at a certain point the demand starts to really drop off. Like, I think once we pass this node, we could probably let our C line go for a little bit before thinking about extending it. And we could bring it all the way up here to, I guess, what's all the way up to this town. And there does seem to be a rail line cut out, so maybe we could have another light metro line follow this. And that might actually be really useful for bringing some of these people down, since the distance would be pretty decent between our C line the closer we get to downtown Chicago. But I think we are doing pretty well. Let's check in on our B line. So it looks like this might have added another 3,000 or 4,000 people. The station ridership numbers are saying 6,000 here. So I think maybe the more we keep extending this line, the more people will get using our B line. Because this does have a good amount of demand. It seems pretty consistent. Maybe all the way out to here where it looks like Norwood Park is. So we could probably bring it all the way out to there and still get another 5,000 to 6,000 people per station. I think it would be nice to have satellite imagery on here, but I can see pros and cons to either. I think it's hard to get a nice, high quality, sort of polished look with satellite images. I suppose what I could do is I could just have Google Maps up next to me with Chicago, and that might give a bit more context as to what we're building and where. But I think from a game developer point of view, I think this game is pretty much pulled entirely from survey data and whatever the database is for buildings. Because I know you can get a database of 3D buildings, which I think this is pretty much built on. But now we have enough money to pay off our bond, and we do have the required revenue, so it's revenue, not profit, that we need to unlock the $500 million bond. So now we can really get into building a decent sized project, at least for a light metro. So I think that's what we're going to do. I think that's going to be, we're going to extend the sea line all the way up to either here or up to here. We'll use a $500 million bond to help us pay for that. And I think that'll be a good stopping point for the stream. So, thank you guys again for watching and supporting. It is nice to play games and have some input from you guys. So let's think about building out the rest of this line. We'll pin our demand stats. And because we're building over a road, this is pretty much going to have to be plus 15 meters the entire way. I think we'll go to this road. And then we'll have to figure out a way to weave it into here. Because I guess we could just build over the water and have a line that does that, but that doesn't quite seem right. I'm wondering if there's a way we could switch over to this road. Because then we can continue going north and just follow the road. There doesn't seem to be a good spot to do that. We could maybe come out and then cut in and make this curve. That might be our best option. We'll do that. Or actually, we'll have a station closer. We'll do this. Then we'll delete this one and build it right over top of this large residential node. We'll have another one here. And I think our last one will be here. Or actually, no, we'll just go all the way out to this point. Don't really see a reason not to. And so we're already up to 630 million. I think this project is still doable. I guess Or I hope I didn't just build all that as heavy metro. We might have to, yeah, we're gonna have to delete all this and rebuild it, so this might be cheaper as light metro. But I think we figured out the route. We just have to get these stations rebuilt. There we go. Now we have the light metro stations. We can continue doing this. I think these still make sense. I think we had just 2 more. I know we had one here. Don't think we had one between these. So I think these were all the stations we had before. That's a little bit cheaper for light metro. That's only 420 million. So now we can come through and connect these up. And then we have to make this corner, which we can almost do just by connecting to the station. But we'll probably have to do this a bit more carefully. Trying to keep our speed somewhat decent so we don't lose too much time coming in. And then here's where we're going to have to make our sharpest turn. Right between the buildings. It looks like we can do it. It's going to be a little bit slow. We do have a bit of space to overshoot it, so we can keep our speed above 10 miles an hour. And I think from this point on, it's pretty straightforward. We have 1 or 2 more bends to make. But we should be able to keep everything somewhat high speed. Alright, so that's connected to the last station there. We can take a look at cost, which is 768 million. And so doing some quick math, we do need to save up about $80 more million in order to be able to do this project. And so this will get us most of, well, I guess not most of, but a good portion of the waterfront area along Chicago. So while we're waiting for our money to build up, it looks like after our last couple of stations we've built, we are up to about 72 to 75 million dollars a day. So I think that's getting to pretty decent numbers. That pretty much means we can start to always be building projects and there won't be too much sitting around and waiting to do. However, we do have to wait for about $60 million to come in. The Chicago map spreads out pretty far. I'm not sure if the map size is different from map to map. I don't really know what the relationship of the size of the Philly map is to the size of the Chicago map. I imagine it's probably a square. I don't know how many miles this would be, but like a 25 by 25 mile square. I'm not sure if that sounds right. I'm not sure if they do the same size on every map or not. It'd be nice to go even bigger, but then I guess the scope of metro systems aren't much larger than this. I guess at that point you start getting into more like regional rail lines and sort of longer range, higher speed rail. Alright, and so we are just about at the point where we can take our $500 million bond and build this project. I think we'll just wait until we get through the night just so we don't lose money after we take this bond, because we will immediately start paying interest on it. And I think at that point that'll be a sizable chunk of our income. So I think we are at the point where we can take it as we slowly enter the morning hours. Just $1 or $2 million more. I think it would be cool to have different types of trains to run on these tracks. I'm not 100% positive on this, but I do think that there are plans to allow mods, or like the ability to easily access mods, because I think people have been able to mod in different maps. But I think there's plans to allow the ability to easily download mods, and part of that would be different trains and types of trains, because it would be nice to have a bit more variety than simply 2 or 4 cars per train, and then you're kind of stuck with that. Because this light metro would be this C line would be a good candidate to maybe have a few more cars, especially once we add this extension. Have it be a few more cars. If we knew we could go faster, having an express line that we could have an even faster train go on, that could be useful. But I think this is our big extension added, and we'll see where that ends us up demand-wise. So I think we'll want to bump this up to, let's go with 7 trains, because we have had warnings of capacity. Medium demand will go to 5 trains, and then low demand will stick at 3. So we'll let this run, we'll see the results of this, and then I think that'll be a good spot to end the stream. So we can already start to see a good number of population dots popping up here. We could pull up our train list and see how full some of these trains are getting. And it looks like we're already pushing capacity in low demand, even coming into medium demand already. So this might be the crossing point where we switch over to 4 cars instead of 2 cars per train. But I think we will save that for next time. Let's see if we can start to see changes in demand. We already see some of the purple dots showing up. Some of these nodes are turning purple. And I think it's hardly been a day, so more of these might begin to turn purple as we enter different phases of the day. I think we're going to end up around 1.6 or 1.7% of the total population taking our metro network. I think total we're going to be at about 52,000 people. Workers, there's not too much to see here, although it does look like we're covering most of the people at this node. That's pretty interesting to see. That's a decent sized node for workers. It's not the smallest one around. But we can start to look at station ridership. These numbers are still going to go up, I think. But it looks like anywhere between 3,000 to 6,000 per station along here. That is a huge amount of people that we're adding to our overall ridership. We can see where transfers are happening. And it looks like people are transferring here and here, which is pretty much what we were expecting. These stations would be competing with each other because they are somewhat close together. But I don't think there's much of an issue of these people transferring. I think if anything, it just gives them a bit more options on how they want to plan their commute. I think now it's pretty much been a full day running of this extension. Let's look at our overall route ridership, which has almost doubled up to 62,000 people. That is a good amount of people for a light metro line. So hopefully when we extend our A line all the way up this road, we'll start to see similar numbers. Hopefully they won't continue to compete with each other, but I think they will since they'll be only a few blocks apart. So I think eventually we're going to merge up onto this road. And then if I can get the street name, I guess that's not going to pop up. Clark Street still. But these are only separated by about 5 or 6 blocks. So I imagine they'll still be somewhat competing with each other. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So it looks like this is settling in close to 70,000 people. So I'd say it's a pretty successful extension. Let's see if we can take a look at the impacts on our money. So that's also given us a huge bump with revenue. Pushing us all the way over the $100 million of profit a day. And so I'm pretty satisfied with what we were able to cover today. I think this is a good spot to end the stream. I'll do the same thing that I did to start this one. I'll probably let the game run between streams, and hopefully next time we do this, we will start with maybe a few $1 billion instead of just a few 100,000. That way we can keep things rolling, have all of your exciting suggestions. We could implement those. I think I'm going to try to settle in on Wednesday afternoons for streaming, and then maybe, depending on the free time I have, some extra streams on the weekend. But I think that's going to be all for this. So thank you guys for joining. The next stream will be Wednesday afternoon, so keep an eye out for that one. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.